Your phone is making you mentally ill. Not metaphorically, not as some vague cultural concern. Literally, chemically, structurally, and the terrifying part? You handed it the knife. Here's what nobody's telling you about the mental health crisis destroying an entire generation. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad parenting. It wasn't the economy or school pressure or kids being soft. It was engineered, deliberately, by people who knew exactly what they were doing, who studied the neuroscience, ran the focus groups, and then built a machine specifically designed to colonize the developing brain of a child and never let go. Jonathan Haidt spent years pulling that machine apart, bolt by bolt, and what he found should make you furious. This isn't a book summary. This is a postmortem on a generation, and a manual for getting out before you become another data point in someone else's profit report. Think about the last time you were genuinely bored. Not scrolling through Netflix bored. Not waiting for a text bored. Actually, truly, achingly bored, with nothing to do and no screen to rescue you from yourself. You probably can't remember, and that's the problem. Haidt pinpoints a specific moment in history, around 2012. That's when smartphone adoption among teenagers crossed a tipping point, when Instagram scaled, when the social internet stopped being something you visited and became something that lived inside you. Before 2012, teen mental health was basically flat, depression, anxiety, loneliness, all tracking at relatively stable rates. After 2012, the graph breaks. It doesn't drift upward. It fractures. Rates of depression among teen girls surge by over 150%. Anxiety, self-harm, suicide attempts, all climbing in almost perfect correlation with the rise of the smartphone and social media. That's not a coincidence. That's causation wearing a very thin disguise. Here's the psychological lesson underneath the numbers. The human adolescent brain, and this is the part that should genuinely unsettle you, is not a smaller adult brain. It's a brain under construction, specifically wired to seek social belonging, to be hypersensitive to status signals, to learn through physical risk and real-world consequence. Evolution built teenagers to go out into the world, fall down, embarrass themselves, fight, make up, and slowly, painfully, develop into resilient adults. The brain expects that friction, needs it. What it got instead was a screen that delivered a synthetic, frictionless, algorithmically curated version of social reality. One that the brain couldn't distinguish from the real thing, but that provided none of the actual growth. You gave a developing brain the nutritional equivalent of junk food and called it a meal. Then you acted surprised when it started starving. Here's something that sounds insane until you think about it for 5 seconds. We banned lawn darts. We put warning labels on toys. We designed entire playgrounds around the principle that a child should never, under any circumstances, scrape a knee. We became so obsessed with physical safety that we wrapped an entire generation in bubble wrap, and then handed them a device with a direct pipeline to predators, cyberbullies, eating disorder communities, and algorithmic rabbit holes and said, "Good luck, kid." Haidt calls this the great rewiring of childhood. And it has two sides, one that overprotects in the real world, and one that catastrophically underprotects in the digital one. Both of them are destroying kids, just in different ways. The real-world overprotection piece works like this. A child who never faces genuine risk never learns that they can survive risk. They grow up with an internal alarm system that has never been properly calibrated. So when actual adversity hits, and it always does, they have no framework, no scar tissue, no proof that they can handle it. The anxiety isn't irrational. It's actually the logical result of a childhood that never gave them evidence of their own resilience. Think about your own toughest moments. The times you look back on and think, that made me. Almost none of them happened on a screen. They happened in the physical world with real stakes, real embarrassment, real pain. That's not nostalgia. That's the biology of growth. Now layer the phone on top of that already fragile foundation. The direct application here is brutal, and it's aimed squarely at you, especially if you're a parent or if you work with young people. Every hour a child spends on social media is an hour they are not spending in the kind of unstructured, physical, slightly risky play that builds the psychological immune system. You're not just adding something harmful. You're replacing something essential. That trade has a price. We're living inside the invoice right now. The data has a gender split so stark it deserves its own conversation. Adolescent boys are struggling, genuinely, but adolescent girls have been hit with the force of a freight train, and the reason is so specific, so tied to the mechanics of how platforms like Instagram and TikTok actually function, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Boys, when they went online, largely gravitated toward gaming and video content. Still problematic, still a trap in its own right, but those activities are largely status building rather than status monitoring. Girls were handed something different. They were handed a platform built around appearance, follower counts, likes, comparison, and the constant performance of a life that's better than it actually is. The comparison trap is not a new psychological phenomenon. We've always compared ourselves to our neighbors, our classmates, our peers. But that comparison used to be limited by geography and time. You saw maybe a few dozen people in your daily life. Now you are comparing yourself every single day in real time in the most intimate, vulnerable years of your development to thousands of carefully curated, filtered, optimized presentations of other people's highlight reels. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a real social threat and a digital one. When a teenage girl sees 200 likes on someone else's photo and 12 on her own, her brain reads that as a genuine signal about her social standing in the tribe. And for a brain that has evolved to treat social rejection as potentially fatal, that signal triggers real physiological distress. This is not weakness. This is the exact mechanism that was supposed to keep you alive on the savannah, being hijacked and weaponized by a platform whose entire business model depends on you feeling just inadequate enough to keep scrolling. Why are you still pretending this is a willpower problem? Haidt doesn't just diagnose. He dissects. He breaks the damage into 4 core mechanisms, and understanding them is the difference between vaguely knowing phones are bad and actually grasping what's being done to the brain. Social deprivation. Every hour online is an hour not spent in embodied, face-to-face interaction. And it's that embodied interaction, the eye contact, the physical proximity, the reading of micro-expressions, the awkward silences, that actually trains the social brain. Text and images don't do that. They simulate it. And the simulation is impoverished in ways that matter enormously for development. Sleep deprivation. Phones in bedrooms are sleep destroyers. Not just because of the blue light, because of the pull, the compulsive checking, the social anxiety of leaving a message unread, the dopamine loop that makes it genuinely difficult to put the device down even when your body is screaming for rest. A teenager losing an hour of sleep a night for years doesn't just feel tired. Their emotional regulation, memory consolidation, and mental health all degrade in measurable, significant ways. Attention fragmentation. The average person checks their phone dozens of times a day. Every check is an interruption. Every interruption trains the brain to expect interruption, to become intolerant of sustained focus. Deep work, deep thought, deep feeling all require an attention span that the phone is systematically dismantling. The algorithmic rabbit hole. Recommendation algorithms don't care about your well-being. They care about your engagement. And engagement is driven by emotional activation, outrage, fear, sadness, envy. The algorithm learns what keeps you on the screen. If you're a teenage girl with body image anxiety, the algorithm will learn that diet content keeps you watching, and it will bury you in it. This isn't a bug. It's the product working exactly as designed. These 4 mechanisms don't work in isolation. They compound each other. Sleep deprived, socially isolated, attention fragmented, and marinating in algorithmically curated anxiety. That's the cocktail. That's what we handed to a generation. Here's where most conversations about phone addiction break down. Someone tells you the problem. Maybe they show you some graphs. Maybe they make you feel appropriately guilty. And then they say, put your phone down more. And you try for approximately 4 days and then you fail because the social cost of opting out unilaterally is real. Your friends are on Instagram. Your kid's school communicates through a group chat. Opting out alone doesn't protect you. It just isolates you. This is the collective action problem, and Haidt is one of the few people writing about it with any intellectual honesty. Individual willpower is not going to solve a structural problem. You can't meditate your way out of a system that was designed by the smartest behavioral psychologists in the world specifically to defeat your self-control. The actual solutions Haidt proposes are structural, social, collective. No smartphones before high school, not as a personal preference, as a norm. The same way we've built social norms around seatbelts, around drunk driving, around smoking indoors. Individual decisions only become sustainable when they're backed by community standards. Phone-free schools. Not please turn your phone face down. Actually phone-free. The research on this is unambiguous. Schools that remove phones see immediate improvements in academic performance, social interaction, and student well-being. Not because phones are inherently evil, but because the adolescent brain cannot resist them, and expecting a 14-year-old to do so is not discipline, it's fantasy. More free, unsupervised play. More physical risk. More boredom. More of the actual raw material that builds resilient human beings. Less optimization. Less scheduling. Less curated, supervised, helicopter-parented structure that teaches a child. The world is dangerous and you can't handle it. The direct application for you is this. If you're an adult in a child's life, the single highest leverage thing you can do is not limit your own screen time. It's use your social influence as a parent, a neighbor, a teacher, a community member, to build collective norms that make it easier for all kids to be phone-free, because your kid can't opt out alone. But if enough parents make the same call at the same time, the social cost disappears. That's not idealism. That's how every successful public health intervention in history has worked. Here's the thing about Haidt's book that separates it from 100 other hand-wringing cultural critiques. He's not blaming teenagers. He's not blaming parents. He's not even primarily blaming the tech companies, though their culpability is staggering and they should be held to account. He's blaming a system, a set of interlocking decisions by platforms, by regulators, by a culture that confused safety with overprotection and freedom with digital access, that created a perfect storm of developmental harm at exactly the wrong moment in human history. And that framing matters, because shame is not a mechanism of change. Shame makes you defensive. Understanding makes you capable. You are not failing because you're weak. Your kids are not failing because they're soft. An entire generation is struggling because we handed them an infinitely engaging, neurologically powerful, socially omnipresent technology during the most developmentally sensitive period of their lives, with no guardrails, no literacy, no preparation, and no collective norms to help them resist it. The anxious generation didn't make themselves anxious. We built the machine. We deployed it. We called it progress. The question now, the only question that actually matters, is what you're going to do with that knowledge. Because knowing this and doing nothing, that's not neutral. That's a choice. And it has a cost. You've just watched someone else's kids pay it. The next bill is due.